Like how did you feel, what are the best ways to value your work? I think in the sample working group this week, Gideon mapped out different types of value. So the social value, financial value, cultural value, and what was the other one, Gideon?
Expertise.
Expertise value. And there are a few others too, but if we think about those as like some of the main values we have in the TEC, like forms of wealth, how do you feel is the best way for you to be compensated, for you to feel actually valued? Like, are you in a position that financial wealth is something that will make you feel more valued, or that education is something that will make you feel more valued? So maybe a direct question is, how have you been feeling? How have you been feeling with um, this dynamic of the value you produce and the value you receive from the TEC? Considering that we have a few streams of compensation. So we have voluntary work, like maybe there is some of the work you're doing that you feel it has not been compensated at all. Like maybe you feel like it wasn't captured by the reward system, by praise, or by anything. Is there work that you feel that has been voluntary? And how do you feel about that? There is the compensation from grants. So that's how working groups have been compensated now, most of them. It's coming from the common pool. And there's the reward system that will have our first distribution this week, so it'll become more clear soon. But things that you do that you've been praised for, so you know that you receive some financial compensation through TEC tokens for it. And there's also people that work in the TEC that have been compensated by the Common Stack. And this is also another source. So how have you been feeling in general? Sorry if this was a lot of information. And I'll pass to Chewy to kick us off.
Hey, Livy. Sorry, I lost track of the last part. Could you repeat the question? Oh, yeah. How, terms of compensation. I feel that I'm in a position where after the Commons upgrade, I wanted to give myself like the chance to explore other projects like in my own like community, and I felt really comfortable with the idea of taking on with steward functions rather than like directly involved communications. And it was originally because I wanted to, like, in a way, decentralize a little bit the creative decisions in the TEC around communications. And at the same time, this was giving me the opportunity of following just the role of stewarding. I feel that probably that was like I mean, it was a good step because I think it has helped the teams just grow a lot and have a little bit more of autonomy. However, I do feel that I still have like many functions that are more like directly involved, which is okay. Like, I feel comfortable with it, but I do feel that like within compensation, it should have been something like that was like considered. And I've been talking to Manu a lot about this, and also with Escanore, we are. I mean, the complementary proposal that we are posting in the forum this week. touches on that subject, like still the need for someone to leave in like efforts some of the times. So I feel that this situation is like a little bit revealing, not necessarily around compensation, but as still like some needs that we have on depending and taking decisions based on a logic that it's exactly what we're trying to change. So also talking to Durgaras, I feel that to I feel that some countermeasures for this could be for the stewards to get more involved with liberating structures, and I feel that this like compensation fields, if it's either like good or bad, I feel that are a consequence of something that we are not doing good, not really like cause for other types of things. So sorry, I rambled a little bit, but yeah, I do feel that I had like a lot to say around this. So yeah, I would I'm very anxious to hear some other opinions on this. I'll pass it to Tam.
I'm also super curious to hear some opinions about this. I think that there's a few things at play. First of all, I think there are many of us in the TEC that work with different organizations and have compensations that are also outside the TEC and not just within the TEC, and some that are just within the TEC. So that's sort of a differentiating factor. And then, depending on where you live, the compensation is really quite notoriously low. And when I first did the Stewards Working Group funding, somebody made a comment, I think it was Angela who made a comment in the funding that was like, this is really low, compared to other Web3 organizations and other DAOs. And I think that can be, it is, I think it depends on what people are in their lives. In France or the US, it's actually really difficult to have a life with the compensation models that I would say, have adopted from Common Stack. So something around 19 DAI an hour, 20 DAI an hour, and then I would say one of the things that I think maybe exacerbate. But isn't responsible for, but it sort of exacerbates, is that, our reward system has been down for multiple months. So the only source of compensation had been these role funded, these working group funded roles. And that was never how it was designed to be. It was always designed to be a community that, in fact, maybe depending on where you want to slide the scale, most of the funding or all of the funding comes through the reward system rather than these role-based works. I don't know that would necessarily be any better, but we went from having the compensation be based on the reward system to like zero reward system and only these roles. And then I think that there's some thoughts there. I only just saw Mount Manu's message on the rewards forum post yesterday, and I guess I was a little taken by surprise that it was a contentious issue at all. I guess it wasn't on my radar, and I'd love to talk with you, Manu, about that. Maybe not in this call, but if you want to talk about that too. And then I think that there's I guess the third thing is like now, and we expected this to happen, now working groups are funding contributors, and contributors will work in many different working groups. So some contributors' monthly compensation ends up being very high compared to others who might have lower compensation because they're really focused on one working group. And there is potentially some feeling of unfairness for that. So I think that there's a lot of things at play. I would say myself personally, my feeling is that while we don't need to exactly be market competitive, I do think that having compensation somehow match the requirements for supporting oneself wherever they are should be an objective that we go to. I don't have any answers for it, but I do think that sacrifice for this mission isn't necessarily the ideal way for us to isn't what should be expected, and that there is some sacrifice that you have to make if you decide to work in in the TEC instead of at Uniswap. So I'd say that I think, yeah, that's where I'd go, and I think that having more competitive compensation should be like where we end up. I just don't think that it's a snap of the finger thing to do. Sorry if I was a little rambly at the end. I think I made all the points I wanted to. So I'll pass to Zeptimus.
I actually agree pretty much with what Tam was saying. The only thing I kinda disagree, like I don't think like someone should get paid more or less depending on where are they living. Like what if someone doesn't even need the money? It doesn't mean like they should not get compensated at all. I don't think that's fair. And yeah, and the other thing, like I feel we are struggling a little bit. It's like we have like these leadership positions, and we can, it's budgeting is different from one working group to another, uh, and that doesn't necessarily it's aligned with the value every working group is providing. So maybe like we could have like some kind of consensus or something like, okay, I don't know if it should be a point on value, because value is very subjective. I could think like maybe, transparency is providing a lot of value, and then Gideon thinks, oh, but Sampo is doing even better, and it's all subjective. But have some kind of consensus or on how we reward contributors, and yeah, again, like I don't think we should focus so much where people is from, but what the value people is bringing to the commons. And I'll pass it to Enti.
Thanks, Septi. Well, I'd say I have been feeling quite good as far as the compensation I've been receiving from the TC, especially because I did enter more with the mentality of, I guess, learning rather than making a living out of it, for example. Um, and, and I don't know, I was, and I'm still are in a phase where I'm kind of exploring a lot and just, just getting information in and analyzing that or whatever. What I would say though is like I feel it's really weird or complex to get compensated in the TC. Like um, at least from the working groups I have been in, and so it's kind of strange to me that we have all these people on sort of working on all these working groups, but I don't think right now it's making financial sense for anybody, particularly the I guess the newer or less committed contributors. It's not like you have to expect a salary or anything, but I guess if I were looking for compensation for a decent compensation on the TC right now, I wouldn't know where to go for that, or and that's kind of what I've been thinking with everyone's comment, and perhaps we there's no way to get compensated because we don't really need that right now, but just just thoughts about that. But yeah, I have personally been feeling quite good about what happened recently. With that, I'll pass it on to Lucas.
Yeah, so I think I've made a total of $2,000 in the year and a half that I've been with TEC. Um, that just somehow seems wrong. I don't know. Maybe not. So I've got some kind of issues with that, in some sense. In the, it's also true. I know that, just to use one example, I couldn't have worked any more closely with Juan about the gravity group, and during the hatch, he has 4 times the tokens I have. That seems unfair too. So, there's a couple of points of unfairness that I feel. And I frankly came into this thing initially not really expecting anything at all, but, but I was kind of with this mindset that, there's some future compensation and blah, blah, blah. And then just now we're at it, and I appreciate the retrospective, money, and that's nice, but it's also true. It's just really a tiny amount. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, in terms of, I feel like if I'm gone for a while, I'm constantly getting praised, and so, that's nice. But even so, it's weird to me. So if you think about it, the TE tokens are there, and that's great. It's just when you look at the proportion of those things, it's heavily toward the stewards and folks like me who kind of drift in and out. Maybe less so. But with respect to gravity, I would say that um, maybe slightly less of a contributor to gravity, just because I didn't have to be in every meeting. But it's also true that he was also being paid all that time. So it's weird to me that you would get 4 times the tokens, at the end of the hatch while being paid. Do you know what I'm saying? It just seems strange to me. Also, I just feel completely excluded from the entire discussion about
Can,
rewards.
can I say one thing, Douglas?
So what?
In the hatch, you could get tokens also putting money.
I'm sorry?
In the hatch, you could get tokens putting money.
Yeah, that's true.
I think what just to include what's up to elaborate on that, Wonka did put in funding into the hatch and did have some tokens from there as well. So I don't
Yeah.
think that the comparison is necessarily based on.
Yeah, I put some money in too. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying that, you could tell at the point of the hatch what was happening versus, do you know what I'm saying? Like, so, uh, you know, I I would probably do this anyway, just because I appreciate the company and all that. It's just that if you're going to compensate people and then you're going to ask them how they feel about the fairness of it, then that's the way that I feel about it. Do you know what I'm saying? It is very low. Yeah, I do spend a fair amount of time producing the things that I do and thinking about and reflecting on, and I think I've been productive in a bunch of different working groups. Do you know what I'm saying? So, and yeah, I've gotten some retrospective stuff out of that. But really, even if you were to total up all of the current pricing of all of the tokens that I have and all the retrospective bonuses that I have, it would be, maybe 16 or 17 grand, right? In terms of, and I would say I was one of the more participating people in this group, right? So I'm just being super transparent, just because I feel like it's there. So I don't know. There's some things about rewards I'm concerned about, and I don't feel like people wanted to hear those things. So I'm a little bit, weirded out by the structure here in some sense, and I feel like there should be more CBI oriented things. And yeah, I don't know. I just there was a group with Griffin, and they were like,
To break
"Yeah,
up
we
a
built the
little
system."
bit.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me okay now?
You're breaking up quite a lot.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Sorry, we were hearing you great until like few seconds ago.
So
Judy, would you like to go next?
Sorry, who did you say, Libby?
You.
Okay. This is such a big topic. I don't even know where to start, but I will say this is very front of mind for me. Actually, we had a meeting with the Writers Guild yesterday, and this was one of the things that came up. And one of the big questions is like, why are you even here? Like, what are you doing this because you hope to get some compensation? We may be shifting some of the focus in the Writers Guild to be a little bit more focused on like promotional copy and like less editorial stuff right now. And so that kind of changes the perspective of folks, when they were writing articles that were more about them just exploring ideas, they were more willing to do that without compensation. When you have like tasks that need to get done for the organization, it's like, well, actually, I would hope to be paid for that, was kind of some of the sentiment. And so I guess this kind of gets to the bigger question that I'm struggling with, which is, there are these different types of rewards that come. And, some of it does have to do with the meaning or sense of purpose that we get from the work. For example, the old organization that I used to run, we had a very strong mission, where it was like consulting for the environmental movement. And, we didn't, and these were top technical people, like knew how to do CRM, database consulting and stuff like that. They could have made a lot more money in other places. And we paid them probably about 60-70% of what they could have gotten someplace else. And they did it because there was a mission that they believed in. But at a certain point, people started having kids, or the life caught up with them, and they just couldn't afford it anymore. As much as they really loved the idea of doing it, and it gave them great meaning, and it just tore them up inside when they had to leave. So this was a big issue for me. I've wrestled with this a lot over the years. And I see that I'm starting to run into it here. Like the Softgov Working Group is going to be another example of this, right? It's like, and so I guess one thing that what's interesting is we have a number of levers here, which is cool actually. So, there's, we're starting to play a little bit with bounties. Chewy, you guys have been doing some interesting work on that front with D-Work, and then we've got the compensation from the working groups, and then rewards, right? And actually one of the things that I'm really interested in is like the optimism folks are digging into retroactive public goods funding, and this idea that you can kind of look back in time and then reward people for things that have, like, you can see have an impact today. You pay them for what they did earlier, and in a way I kind of see that focus on impact as being a real differentiator with the reward system. It's like, if that's the lens of like, wow, what you did had an impact on me personally, had an impact on the working group, had an impact on the community, like that's, and it does seem to be kind of embedded in the praise, but it's not, as far as I can tell, not called out specifically, this impact focus. So that's one of the things I'm getting kind of curious about, is how these levers might be worked together. Because last thing I'll just say is like, I'm not sure when I'm doing the quantification for rewards, like if I know that somebody's getting paid to do something in a working group, how high should I calibrate the praise for that work? Like, I don't know the answer to that. And yet that's kind of where these things start to meet, and I think there's something interesting there. Okay, I'll pass it to Edu.
Thank you, Gideon. Compensation is an interesting topic, clearly, for today's conversation. I feel that on my case at the beginning in the TEC, it was a weird situation, because there was no way to know how much, how little. So it was this very inaccurate system at the beginning. Now I feel that the budgeting process that we are following and the funding proposals that we are putting up helps to clarify, at least as a first step. I think it brings clarifications, but at the same time, I feel like there is this mix of feelings in between how much do we take from the legacy system and how much do we have to sort of navigate into guessing, into experimenting until we find a method that will serve the purpose of the organization. So on a personal matter, on a personal sense, I do feel it has been a fair compensation so far. I, for a long time, probably until like 2-3 months ago, I didn't work anywhere else. I only worked with the TC. That was my main source of income, and my only source of income at that moment. And I felt like, so I felt it was fair at that stage. But I did see the unfairness of prolonging volunteer work for people, and make them wait until we had the system adequate for them to be compensated. I felt that was unfair for some folks who were just contributing or joining calls constantly and providing time, and they were not being compensated. And thinking only on the reward as a way to compensate, I don't think it's fair either. I think the reward system, it's more of a holistic thing rather than a direct compensation methodology. So I don't know. I feel like this is an interesting topic. I feel we also have to acknowledge the experimental aspect of it and the error making of it, and there are things that we need to improve as we go. And this is something that I think for new contributors and for contributors who are shy about it or who doesn't know how to bring forward the conversation about money, I think there should be this clarification somewhere in the forum, somewhere in a post that specify where we are in this process, and that this is an experiment that we don't know the answer yet, and that I think that lack of clarification also is missed. So yeah, those are my 2 cents on that. Back to you, Libby.
Manu, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. So I think that perhaps hold on, let me. There you go. Yeah, I think that perhaps one of the catalysts to this question was my response to the rewards distribution forum post, asking if there was compensation for transcribing and dishing the praise from the community call, as it was currently an uncompensated task. And I mean, currently I'm ambivalent about it because I'm glad he brought attention to the issue of compensation or unpaid work. But on the other hand, and taking a closer look at this, transcribing praise is not an example of this, as it was paid by the Common Stack for Ivy and for myself up until the Commons upgrade. And afterwards, it's been only 2 months of community calls, which is not an amount of work that will translate in, I don't know, I feel like there was some complaint aspect to it and not a lot of proactiveness, so reactionary. So maybe a tempest in a teacup, right? So I've also come to learn that I'm one of the highest paid contributors in the Commons, right? Although that's relative to our DAO, which I believe is below the median in terms of like other Web3 organizations. So like I'm aware there's a tension between compensating builders and funding projects that advance token engineering. I just wish that wasn't the case, right? I wish we didn't have to compromise one for the other. And not just wishing, but that's my interesting sample. I'm actively looking for ways to get more funds so that we don't have to sacrifice one for the other. Maybe we can reward contributors more and attract more talent and delegate more. I've talked with some of the stewards, and they claim they've been saying that there's just a ton of work that sometimes they don't know how to delegate, or they want to do that themselves because they feel it would be better done that if they just delegate someone, they have to explain it. And so, yeah, I have no issue with this anymore. As Septi and I talked about it, and yeah, I guess saner heads prevailed. So those are my 2 cents on it, and I will pass it to.
I think
Is that all?
everybody has gone.
Pass it back to you, Livy.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Thanks, everybody. My thoughts on this, I think I'm just gathering them all still, and this is very important information for me when thinking about how we're dealing with the reward system and just now. I mean, we predicted this was going to happen a little bit after the Commons upgrade because there was too many streaming like sources of funding that were going to overlap. So working groups asking for funding because we knew that the reward system wasn't in a good position to provide any funding for people yet, and that we have limited resources in the common pool. Plus, the common stack was transitioning into like not paying for a lot of contributors anymore, and that this funding was going to come from working group proposals. So I think it's natural that everything is so messy right now. And Zaptimus and I have been chatting. He was telling me some results of the audits, which I think is very important for us to make it transparent for everyone to know how much everyone is getting paid. Even if that's uncomfortable at first, I think we all know we don't have like any malicious intent with how this was developed, and just understanding that, like as Tim said, there's people that have been working in multiple working groups that have different funding proposals, and then some people get compensated more than others, and maybe there are a lot of contributions that are falling into the cracks. So something I also wanted to mention today was just being honest with our own expectations and understanding like, oh, there are certain types of work that I expect to be paid for with the financial wealth. And maybe this could be helpful of like understanding which tasks we're doing are being paid with different types of wealth. And I thought it was interesting what you brought up, Gideon, that like when people do an article that is sharing their ideas, maybe they're being paid with a different type of wealth. And that's why they don't feel exploited in a way, or they don't feel like they needed a direct financial compensation for that. So, and Durgadas also had a really good map of different types of wealth. And maybe we could develop in Softgov a framework for people to understand from the tasks they've been doing what types of compensation they are receiving. And for us to start changing our mentality for like a one and only type of reward that is the financial one. And that maybe will bring more clarity to like how much do we need financially. And different people can have different expectations for what they need financially, and need, I think, should be very subjective to a person's like, I think anyone has the autonomy or should have the autonomy to decide what lifestyle they want to have. And if they have a number of financial wealth they would like to be receiving that is incompatible with the financial wealth the TEC can provide right now, for that to be clear and for people not to be frustrated when they join the TEC and start contributing. So who would like to, I would love to like work on this. I think it's very important. Who would like to help me? I think we can start creating something async.
I'm
Yeah,
actually,
I'm good.
I'm actually just against of getting expectations, because I think it should be correlated with value. Like I can have an expectation, right? Like, and if I can just say, oh, maybe I want to go to live to Switzerland, or maybe I want to go to Costa Rica because it's cheaper. But does it mean I have to get to save more or less? I don't think that's fair. I think it should be more aligned with the value provided than with the expectations. Like expectations of people can be anything. Like I can expect get 10K a month, and
Um,
I think yeah.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Ned.
I just wanted to say that I think it's expectations are important. Maybe not expectations as far as how much do I want to make, but also expectations as far as like what's what's in it at the TC for a contributor. It's like it's really it can get there are not clear expectations as far as how can you sort of at least financially grow in the TC. And I think that's probably important to make everyone aware of what's happening, what's available, what's not. The,
Yeah, I think we're all agreeing. Maybe I didn't express myself well. I just wanted to clarify. Is that using your example? I think definitely someone should be able to, like, if you want to travel around, if you want to, like, what is a certain type of autonomy I need to have over my expectations for my own life, of like how much I want to be compensated to do the things I want to do, independent of where I live, or like, let's say this is what I'm looking for, and there is the value I can contribute to the organization. And then considering the value I can contribute and the expectations I have for my living wage, whatever that is for each person, can the TEC meet my expectations? And if it can't, I think this should be clear for people that are joining. And then perhaps there is a pathway, like Auntie said, of like, what is the possibility of financial growth a person has in the TEC? And just have that more explicit.
Just want to comment on on the part of the context. And I agree a little bit. Maybe you change your mind, I don't know, but I agree with this idea of the context matter. Like it's not the same being in France than in being in Panama, than in being in Costa Rica, and that could be something that is not necessarily valid for new contributors, for people who have, like me or any other long contributor in the TC. That's a difference maker. I feel, and that's something it should be accounted for. It's I don't again, it's not the same living in a privileged space and living in a non-privileged space, and it doesn't mean that the TC has to uh, compensate because you live in a no. It's just acknowledge that that's a reality, and if someone is being underpaid, for example, and that person lives in a underdeveloped country or an overdeveloped country, that will affect the way they work and contribute to the organization. There is no way we cannot not acknowledge the context of contributor on the TEC, ignoring the precedence or the geography aspect of it, because it's way deeper than that. So I bet to disagree on this. Yeah.
But do you agree that you should be the one providing this information? Like, no one should have the right to tell you how much you should get paid based on my understanding of where you live. And I think this is much like this is a very like employer employee mentality. But when we're talking about a self-governed organization, that you, like, we're trying to if we're trying to build agency here for people to have like bureaucracy to commit with things that are comfortable for themselves. What is the culture we need to foster for people to decide for themselves how much they need, and to be able to communicate that in a way that is clear for everyone?
Yeah, but this is a question I fall into this when we did the budget for Communitas. Like, I never asked any of the contributors, like, do you feel comfortable with this? I mean, we sort of put it in the open and expect people to reply yes or no, but money is a complicated task and people get tricky about this, and we cannot expect people to immediately assume the responsibility when they enter an organization to say, hey, I deserve this, because we are not brain trained to be like that. So so I feel like we, at least from the people people who are in the know, we should be able to ask this question, like, hey, do you feel comfortable with this? Do you feel that this is okay? And yeah, of course, it's not for us to fulfill that expectation, every answer they come up with, but it's also on our part to ask, not only to expect them to demand.
Just adding on to that, I think what's becoming really clear to me is that when people are onboarding into the TEC, there are lots of things that they're confused about, right? But one of the things I think we're going to run into over time is this question. It's like, can I make a living here? Or am I just volunteering? And so once we get this figured out, I mean, this is very complicated, and it's beautiful. Like just this conversation, like the nuance of this is incredible. Like it's so cool. And once we get it figured out, I think it's going to be super important for us to just be very clear when people come in. It's like, hey, here's, so you can decide for yourself. I mean, I love that framing, which is, here's the clear articulation of what our policy is. And then you decide. It's just like any DAO or any kind of crypto economic mechanism. It's like, it's permissionless. We're gonna publicly state what the terms are, and then you decide whether you want to join or not, right? So I think I love where this is going. I think it's very exciting. It's going to be complicated.
Yeah, I agree. It's complicated. I want to add to that too, and to the last part of that, just that everything is so transparent is really cool. I mean, I think other DAOs have a lot of transparency as well. But of course, traditional organizations, if they publish their salary sheet, there's just like, revolt. And that happened in one company I was working with, that there was an accidental Excel spreadsheet that went out, and if you like scrolled all the way to like the ZZZ column, you'd see everyone's salary, and people were quitting, rage quitting, setting things on fire. I mean, it was a disaster because two people that do exactly the same work had very great variance in what they were compensated. So I also, I guess, want to say that I've had the experience having onboarded a lot of people and sort of tried to match people with skill sets to pieces of work and work streams in the TEC multiple times, where the person was a great fit and they're like, I get paid this much where I am now. I can't, and most of these people, who I'm not going to name, of course, will like come in and out of the TEC and still come to contribute where they can, but they can't actually make it their home organization because finances is limited for them in that perspective. So there's an element of, I think that this is what many volunteer organizations and nonprofit organizations suffer from. You're hoping to have some value to offer to people who can come and contribute and learn, as NT mentioned, as well as have some sort of permanence to keep the mission moving forward. And I don't know what else to add other than that, other than saying, I think that there are people who fall in love with the TEC and what we're doing, but but we can't offer a livable wage for where they are based. Yet.
I mean, we don't necessarily need to pay people more. What if we offer like wealth management services, like investment for people? And also, what if we made it for only for people that have TC, right? So you can only invest the equivalent amount that you have in TC tokens. So that would incentivize people to hold TC, and then you don't have to pay them more, but what they're already making, they can decide to put. And I mean, that's what legacy systems do. That's what Web2 companies do. They, so I don't know. That's just something that's probably more like sample, but yeah, I don't know why we're not doing that already.
I think that's more legal. That sounds very illegal, very complicated for us to offer. Let me offer investment opportunities for you if you own our utility token.
Oops.
Probably also off topic, but I really like one idea that Griff had. Like, and it doesn't have. I feel like he was saying like everyone puts like 20K, and then we do. I mean, he wanted to do it in a more deep focus, but I know like what if everyone like we're a group of friends and we all love to DJ in our private life. What if we put 20K and we DJ together, and then 1% of our profits goes to the TC, right? I think that was a pretty fun idea that Chris shared, and there was not so much support in the Steward chat, but I honestly love that idea.
That idea comes a little bit with privilege in order to be able to do it. So it's quite barrier gated.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I think those are.
Yeah, maybe we just don't put an entry barrier. I don't know, but the more money we have, like the more money that goes to the TC.
My gut feeling is that those are great ideas to not be like explicitly branded out of the TC, or that things like that could be happening and that they are interesting, but from a more like we are a group of friends doing this kind of thing.
Can I comment on something briefly, if it is possible? I don't know if this makes sense at all, but could be interesting to have a conversation that we talk about compensation and value, but I feel we talk more about compensation than value. And I think it will be a healthy conversation to have separation of value out of compensation and think about the value aspect of ourselves as individuals in the organization, rather than only thinking on the reward we will get out of that. Because I think we still have this legacy system of all work you get paid because you stay overdue on your job position, you do extra hours, you get more money out of that. So if we make a step back and think more about the value aspect of ourselves in the organization, taking the money out of the picture just for a while, just for a conversation, it could be interesting to see how do we feel regardless of the compensation in our value in the organization.
Yeah, that was kind of my point. Maybe it wasn't clear to understand what are other ways where we feel compensated that is not financially, and what are some other types of value that we are offering that like it's easier to understand value, subjective value, when we're thinking about the giver, because what we're giving in the TEC is rarely financial. We're giving our time, our expertise, our social skills, our many different types of wealth. But then when we are receiving, it's almost like we close the funnel to only perceiving financial rewards. And how can we expand this spectrum to also acknowledge other types of rewards that we are receiving? I don't know if that's related to what you're saying, Edward.
Yes, and also on this idea of, yeah, it is what you just said. It's about value and thinking thinking outside the money spectrum. I think we are not. I think no, I'm talking about myself, so I will just bring it personal. I think I am not deconstructed enough to, not funnel the reward only on money. So I think the testament is this conversation that we had was more focused on that. I felt that's a personal point of view. So I think that it could be interesting. So if we have, even for new contributors and contributors, I think it's healthy to have this conversation about value, and acknowledge and ask about it. Like, hey, Writers Guild, how do you like what Gideon just did also in their part? Like, how do you feel about it? Like, what do you think is the value, and how do you, and sort of create this mild cultural aspect that the TC, when people ask about reward, and if they will be compensated for the job that they're gonna be doing, also bring to the table, hey, yes, there is a reward in place, but there is also values in place that comes with being part of the organization. And I think that sort of idea or tunnel of thoughts we haven't developed it yet. So it's tricky for new contributors also to be aware of that if we are not ourselves. So yeah.
Just one quick note. I really believe that part of the expertise that we're building for the community is going to flow back to people, and that idea that I can come here and develop professionally and personally. This is some of the stuff Durgadas has been talking about for a long time, but it's like, that idea that you can come here and grow as an individual is so powerful. That will be, I'm convinced that will be the differentiator for a lot of people, like why they come here. And I've heard it from the writers. And I mean, I think if we start listening, we're going to hear this a lot more. That like the idea of a deliberately developmental DAO is super powerful.
Thank you, Mert, for joining. I invited Omega Crew to join today to speak a little bit about the tea flower integration. Unfortunately, we ran out of time. We had this conversation that I didn't time block because I thought it was important for us to go through this. And hopefully next week, I know you have a sync at the same time, but maybe someone from Omega could join us last week so we could expand a little bit on that.
Sure. Before I go, I just want to say I love the conversation has been going about the value because, for example, for a couple of months in my TC, I have not compensated, but it wasn't problem for me because I was compensated from somewhere else, so I could keep participating it. But my participation was about because like I was talking with Shebnem all the time and Stewards, all those other people who has very brilliant ideas, and I was learning a lot. So even just the feeling of learning was keep me motivated to come to every meeting. I was never missing a meeting, etc. So yeah, like I think showing that you can get more than financial value within TC is very important because that's what I actually motivate me to like participate TC more. So just wanted to express my feeling.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.